Hey guys, this is Joe D with the Ron House Report. As always, I always have to date because in 1 hour things can go on blast, so I always have to keep a date. It is 2:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Monday, May 6th. All right. With that in mind, I actually made one video prior to this one, and it was one of the issues was so encompassing that it was pushing 10 minutes, and I had two other topics to talk about. So I'm going to make separate videos. Okay, apparently last night, and you know all these campus protests, NYU, UCLA, Columbia, Portland, Oregon, I forget what the university is called, Texas, I forget what the university is called, SUNY in New York City. I mean, these guys have encamped everywhere, in some places more than others, just depending on the momentum of the group and who's supporting the group. And that's the issue. During the Vietnam War, the Soviet Union let's say that they spent $1 billion to fund and train the North Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong, which was the guerrilla group of that. And then the massive hippie, pro-commune, pro-communist-esque, socialist-esque ideals, or, free love, let's live on a commune, no one will be in charge, we'll all be in charge. So out of that 1 billion during the Vietnam War, the Russians sent half the money they spent to protest organizers in the United States, many of whom were flown in from Russia, just so you know. So $500 million to help the North Vietnamese war effort. And I saw a documentary that the second part is probably the most damaging. The second part was another $500 million to the demonstrations, these mass rallies by the hippies. I mean, if you watch videos, they pack the Washington Square, or rather the mall. They're everywhere. And so what I'm getting at is that people are helping these. It's like the Black Lives Matter, that movement where you suddenly had sponsors like George Soros coming in and bankrolling. Qatar in the Middle East, who controls Al Jazeera. Just so you know, Al Jazeera is not independent. It's a state-run media source based out of Qatar, which, by the way, is where top Hamas leaders live in luxury. Palaces, everything. They're safe. So, Qatar, for years, and I didn't realize this until a few days ago. I watched two documentaries. Qatar, for years now, in its totality, has spent billions of dollars infiltrating the faculty and the administration of these Ivy League colleges, namely Columbia, NYU, UCLA, and those are the three main ones that I know. I know there's protests all over the country at all sorts of campuses, but it started at Columbia, NYU, and UCLA. And I'm not talking about the students, obviously. I'm talking about the faculty. They have been paid systematically. It's about $6 million a year. But over the years, we're talking 20 or 30 years here. We're basically talking when the hippies, the ones who didn't become drug addicts with heroin, the smart hippies that wanted to pursue education, higher education, and then become a professor themselves. In the early 70s, they transitioned from the hippie movement. By 1971, the hippie movement had devolved into just a bunch of heroin addicts getting high. No more mind expansion, none of that crap. The smart, quote, hippies moved into academia, and many of them right now, again, the Russians sponsored so much of it. You had socialists, you had communists. One of my professors was an outspoken communist. So you have these different groups coming together. Nobody's doing anything about it. They're allowed to do whatever they want to do, but they are funded. These faculty members, Qatar pays for fellowships. They'll make a donation for some kind of a library, like a large library console for the actual library, say in Columbia, and it'll be like $50,000. Well, the money's sent into the faculty, into the administration. They never buy it. These are just terms, kind of money launder. We're going to send you money for a new library book system. That money goes into the pockets of the faculty. It goes into the money in the pockets of the administrations of these different colleges. Now, like I said, the smart hippie, by smart I mean they didn't become a bunch of heroin addicts. The smart ones who truly were intellectual and wanted to pursue intellectualism as their career, as their path in life, they entered in the early 70s into the academia across the country. And you have the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 20-teens. These guys have been getting much, much money from Qatar. And a lot of that money, I'm sure, is going to pay for professional agitators and protesters at these campuses who really don't care about the issues. They are paid there to be almost quasi-mercenary protesters, if you want to put it in that sense. So the highest echelons of some of the best schools in the United States were essentially paid off, and they would have them come over to, say, Qatar, and they would not indoctrinate, but they would have these presentations, and they would be sent back, and they were expected to, because of the money they were being paid, to bring these up into their lectures, into their curriculums. Okay, kind of got off track there, and that's why I had to cancel my other video. I'm already at 6 minutes. For the first time since these protesters started, finally, and I've been wondering, after the Holocaust, the Jews had a saying, never again, never again. And that's currently the motto of Israel, never again. So I was wondering at the very beginning of this, when I'm seeing, good grief, these pro-Gazan encampments, they'll take someone, they'll throw them on the ground, and they'll jump on top of them, and they'll just start beating them. It's awful. It's very, very violent. It's being underreported. It's profoundly violent. So I'm almost like, man, where are the Jews at? The Jews aren't a bunch of pussies. The Jewish mafia in the 50s, the 40s, where are the Jews, the tough guys? Well, apparently they showed up, I think last night, to UCLA in Los Angeles. But I have a feeling that they weren't pro-Israel. I have a feeling that they were hired by some NGO, even the mayor, let's say the mayor of LA, they see these issues on UCLA. So I'm not trying to be too conspiratorial, but 100 to 200 protesters showed up, counter protesters, and they literally invaded the tent cities. They pulled down all these wooden barricades that had been made to shelter the tents. They pulled them all down. They had sticks. They had bats. They were beating people with them, yelling obscenities. And then before the police were able to intervene, so they were there for about an hour, hour and a half, launching this offensive, if you want to put it that way, breaking up these encampments, tearing things down, beating these, which I don't agree with beating them, but, with bats. But they were gone within an hour and a half before the cops could really act, because it was so fluid. And the fact that they were able to punch out from their headquarters, do an hour and a half intense protest, and they didn't have an Israeli flags. And that's kind of what I mean. I don't know who these people are. For all I know, they could just be thugs that were hired by the mayor of LA or a right-wing source, not Soros, he's the left wing, but a right-wing source. Finally, 100 to 200 protesters showed up to beat the shit out of these guys, to rip down their encampments, and they went home very quickly. They punched out, they collapsed back in. These military parlance. That shows a level of professionalism that we're seeing in the pro-Gaza, pro-Palestinian encampments. These people have professional leaders who know what they're doing. They've been paid off by who knows whom. Russia, China, Qatar, Iran, who knows? But they're definitely, there's base protesters, and then there's the ones that are really intense, the ones who orchestrate, the ones who, say, broke into the Columbia Hall a couple of weeks ago. These guys, they knew what they were doing. They knew, these little college students don't necessarily know how to make not a rampart, but a fortified building. But these guys did. They knew what they were doing, and that's why the police had to crawl into the top windows. So that has to do with the Palestinian protests. I'm sorry, the anti-Palestinian, I'll just say counter-protesters. They showed up to beat the shit out of them. I don't know who they were. They had no markings, just a bunch of dudes showing up. And so That's the first time that I have seen the Jewish community. And again, I don't even know if these dudes are Jewish, but they represented the Jewish community, whether they were hired, whether it was organic, whether they just wanted to go fight someone. I'm just going to say that they were on the side of the Jewish agenda because they were attacking the enemies of the Israelis and etc. All right. Well, they finally came out in a little militia style, 200 of them. They hit quick. They left before they were able to be arrested. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this video, and I pretty much covered everything. Let me look at my notes. Yeah. So that's that. I wanted to make a video where finally the Jews are like banding together, sticking up for each other. Or if they're not Jews, if they're outside hires, professional agitators, which the pro-Gazan encampments are almost factually, they have professional activists running the scene, running what to do next, etc. So the first time now I've seen this, and I'm encouraged by it because maybe this will put these people in another place. You can't just stop people who are paying $70,000 a year to go to Columbia or UCLA and then prevent them from going to classes. And then you have the top rabbi at Columbia saying, Jewish students, stay home. Now I have to do that sucks. If you're in an Ivy League school and you can't even go to class, you have to do it over the computer. Just because people won't let you in, they've literally put up bars. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Finally, the Jews or Jewish sympathetic people took to the street and they beat the shit out of some protesters in UCLA. And hopefully that'll happen more, not because I want to see violence, but because I want to see the shenanigans of all this bullshit ended. No more encampments. This is very similar to Occupy Wall Street. No more encampments. No more chanting themselves together. So let's see how it ends up. I just wanted to throw a quick video up. And for me, 12 minutes is really good. Normally, I ramble on for a lot more. All right. So I'm going to make another video here in a second discussing Tim Pool and Timcast. I just watched 2 videos of his, and I wanted to discuss those a little bit. That'll be in the next video. All right, guys. I hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great weekend. It's Monday. I missed the boat on that one. I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you guys soon.